Let me tell you something about nighttime. When the sun goes down and the lights of Brooklyn start flickering on, a strange kind of magic fills the air. For most, nighttime means sleep, quiet, and the distant sounds of the city settling. But for me, nighttime is freedom. It's my time, a world where Henry and I have the streets to ourselves, and the only one watching is the moon. Now, my name's Frank. I'm a bulldog, in case you couldn't tell from my impressive jowls and stout build. Some might say I look like a grumpy potato with legs, but I've got character. And besides, Henry, my human, calls me handsome, and that's all I need to hear. Henry and I have a routine. Every night around 10, just after he gets back from his job at the insurance company, whatever that is, probably some kind of don't fetch the stick activity humans do, he grabs my leash. I like to think of it as my royal robe, my signal that Frank is about to take his evening stroll and survey his domain. And out we go. The streets at night are my kingdom. There's an energy that I can't explain, and I feel it all the way down to my paws. Henry always humors me, letting me lead the way. You're the boss, he says, even though we both know he's holding the leash. But hey, it's a partnership, right? Now, let me tell you about the sights. There's the deli on the corner with its half-lit open 24 hours sign. The aroma there is so rich that even a few steps away, I can taste it. Pastrami, pickles, cheese, heaven in a sandwich. Sometimes, Henry lets me pause for a sniff, but he always pulls me away before I can make a proper assessment of any dropped crumbs. Doesn't he understand this is my culinary research? Of course, there's also the alley cat, Mr. Tibbles, a scraggly fellow with one eye who thinks he's the king of the block. Every night, he gives me a long, slow stare, as if to say, "You again?" And every night, I stare back like, "Yeah, it's me. What are you going to do about it?" He swishes his tail, I snort, and our standoff continues. It's our thing. But nighttime isn't all familiar smells and cocky alley cats. Sometimes it's downright spooky. Take the shadows, for instance. I'm not ashamed to say that they make me a bit jumpy. Henry thinks it's hilarious when I stop dead, mid-walk, because a particularly sinister-looking lamppost has cast a shadow across my path. "It's just a shadow, Frank," he says, patting my head. But I swear, some of these shadows have teeth. Just the other day, one of them lunged at me from behind a trash bin. Sure, it turned out to be a crumpled pizza box, but you can never be too careful. The scariest thing, though, has to be the wind. You wouldn't believe the things it carries with it. Papers, leaves, mysterious scents, all at once. And don't even get me started on the infamous plastic bag. There's one in particular that lurks near the bodega, and every time it catches a gust of wind, it dances around like a ghost. I have a strict policy of barking at it until Henry pulls me away. Some things you just can't trust. But the best part of our walk, without a doubt, is when we reach the little park a few blocks down. The city sounds softened there, and the streetlights are fewer. The grass under my paws feels cool, and the whole area smells faintly of damp earth and flowers. The moon shines down, and for a few moments, it feels like Henry and I are the only two in the whole world. He usually takes a seat on a bench, letting me roam around a bit on my own. Sometimes I'll chase a moth or dig at a particularly interesting patch of dirt, but mostly I just sit by his feet, feeling, well, peaceful. We don't talk much. Henry and I have this unspoken understanding. He scratches behind my ears, I lean against his leg, and we just sit, watching the stars, smelling the night. I think he needs these moments as much as I do. One of the best things about our nightly walks is the cast of characters we run into. Let me tell you, Brooklyn by night is a whole different place from the busy, rushed world of daytime. There's old Joe, for example, a retired jazz musician who spends his evenings in front of his brownstone with a beat-up saxophone. Every time we pass, he plays a few notes just for me. Henry says it's a treat, and I couldn't agree more. The man's got soul. Then there's Lucy, a bouncy poodle who lives a few blocks over. She's all white fluff and energy, a whirlwind of curls who insists on smelling every single spot I've marked. She prances around like she owns the place, and every night, without fail, she gives me the same look, a mix of pity and exasperation, as if to say, "Frank, you're too slow." I roll my eyes. Speed isn't everything, Lucy. I'm here for the ambiance, not a marathon. Henry, of course, loves to chat with everyone. He's like the mayor of the block, nodding and smiling at every neighbor we pass. And here's the funny part. They all talk to him like he's this mysterious, wise guy. Maybe it's the suit he wears to his insurance job, or his habit of looking up at the stars like he's got something deep on his mind. But I know him better. When we get home, he's just my Henry, who spends way too much time on the couch with a bowl of spaghetti and reruns of old detective shows. Every dog has their moment of glory, their one great caper that they remember forever. Mine was the night I pulled off the great garbage heist. Now, I know what you're thinking. Garbage? Really, Frank? But let me explain. This was no ordinary trash. It was the finest assortment of deli leftovers, pizza crusts, and half-eaten bagels I'd ever seen, all just waiting for me in a bin outside Pete's Pizzeria. The plan was simple. Henry had stopped to chat with Pete, as he does, while I patiently waited. I inched closer and closer until, bingo, I was in range. One swift move with the paw, and the lid popped open. The smell was intoxicating. Just as I was about to reach in, Henry caught me with a sharp, "No," and I quickly switched to my innocent face. But the scent stayed with me, haunting me all the way home. One of these days, I'll get my paws on that treasure. Mark my words. Now, don't laugh, but there's something about the moon that feels personal. Henry says it's probably a bulldog thing, but I swear some nights, it's like the moon is speaking directly to me. Its silver light feels like a gentle touch on my back, and in those moments, I feel bigger, braver, like I'm more than just a short, wrinkly guy on a leash. I'm Frank, Knight of Brooklyn, protector of the park, guardian of the sidewalk crumbs. On those nights, I bark at the moon, not in fear, but in a kind of celebration. Henry just chuckles, but I know he feels it too. It's our secret world, a place where all the big questions don't need answers, and where a simple walk under the stars is all the magic we need. There was one night that really stands out, a chilly autumn evening when Henry and I ran into a stray dog. Now, I'm not one for sentimentalism, but there was something about this guy that tugged at the old bulldog heartstrings. He was scrappy, with a patchy coat and eyes that looked like they'd seen way too much of the world. Henry took one look at him and started muttering about calling someone to help, but I wasn't so sure. The stray didn't look scared or sad. In fact, he looked kind of proud, like he'd made peace with his lot. We exchanged a few sniffs, a polite nod, and then he trotted off into the night without a second glance. I think about him sometimes, wondering what adventures he's found. It's strange. Some dogs don't need humans to feel at home in the world. I couldn't do it, but that's what makes life interesting. Different strokes for different folks, right? Sometimes I think Henry has secrets. He doesn't say much about his life outside of our walks, but I can tell he's got dreams of his own. When we sit by the park, he'll sometimes stare up at the moon with this far-off look, like he's thinking of someone or someplace else. I try to sit a little closer, nudging his hand with my nose to remind him that he's got me. And every now and then, he looks down and gives me a small smile, like he's grateful. I don't know if Henry needs anyone else, but I know he needs me, and that's enough. There's a funny thing about nighttime walks. Sometimes you get the urge to just run. Not after anything in particular, just run for the sake of it. It happens randomly, like a tickle in my paws, and I bolt, dragging Henry along as best I can. His protests mean nothing. I'm on a mission. The sidewalk turns into a racetrack, and I zoom past storefronts, shadows, and old Joe's saxophone notes drifting through the air. In those moments, it's pure, unfiltered joy. Henry calls it my zoomies, and I guess that's about right. Eventually, I slow down, my heart thumping, and look back at him with a smug grin. He rolls his eyes but smiles, as if to say, "You crazy dog." But I know he loves it. We all need a little madness sometimes. And for me, it's the thrill of the chase, even if I'm chasing nothing at all. There are moments, as we walk through our little corner of Brooklyn, when I feel like we own this place. The streets are quiet, the world feels vast, and all the scents and sounds blend together into a symphony just for us. I can tell Henry feels it too. He walks a little slower, his gaze softer. We pass by all our usual haunts, the deli, the bodega with the suspicious bag, the spot where I almost pulled off the great garbage heist, and they all feel familiar, like pieces of our own story. And under the watchful eye of the moon, we're free. If there's one thing about Brooklyn that I can't get used to, It's the strange sounds that pop up out of nowhere. Some nights, when we're walking down a quieter street, I hear things that make my ears stand straight up. Could be the sudden squeak of a gate, or the hum of a generator hidden behind some building, or even the rustle of a bush. Henry's convinced it's nothing, but I know better. There's a whole hidden world out there, and I'm the only one paying attention. There was this one time, I swear, I heard footsteps in the alley next to us. I stopped dead in my tracks, refusing to move forward, and Henry practically had to drag me away. Sure, it turned out to be a raccoon, but still, it could have been anything. I have a responsibility, you see, to protect Henry. He might not realize it, but these streets aren't all cozy delis and familiar faces. They've got mysteries, and it's up to me, Frank, to keep an eye and ear out. Then there are the nights that are just perfect. Crisp air, a bright moon, and everything feels right with the world. On those nights, Henry lets me lead the way, no questions asked. We wander wherever my nose takes us, meandering through streets I don't recognize, following scents that are old friends and new strangers. It's funny, but sometimes I catch Henry looking around with a grin on his face, like he's seeing the world through my eyes. Maybe he's right there with me, feeling the thrill of the unknown, the simple joy of being somewhere we've never been. And on those perfect nights, we don't have to say anything. We're just two explorers, soaking in the beauty of our city. Eventually, our walks come to an end. As much as I love our nighttime adventures, there's something deeply satisfying about coming home. Henry unlocks the door, and I bound inside, heading straight to my spot on the couch. It's warm and smells like us, a mix of Henry's aftershave, the faint whiff of his spaghetti dinners, and maybe a little bit of Brooklyn dust. Henry sits beside me, and we both settle in, content and tired in that satisfying way you feel after a good walk. He strokes my head, murmuring something I can't quite catch, but it doesn't matter. I rest my head on his lap, and we both drift, surrounded by the quiet comfort of our home. I dream of the park, the moon, and our little slice of Brooklyn, and I know that tomorrow we'll do it all over again. Because at night, when the world belongs only to me and the moon, I feel like the luckiest bulldog in Brooklyn.